Well, good afternoon to you both, Scott Baker and Jen Chatwell. Glad to see you both.
Dynamite. Welcome, everybody. Time for another edition of Lead Better. This is our chance to talk about today's field note from Admired Leadership. You probably don't even need me to tell you that today's field note is number 1637 in the count of 4.5 years. The title today is Ask Team Members to Create Their Own Goals. And so goals is going to be a big theme. One of my themes is going to be some of you listening now and not watching don't know this, but Jen's got a very colorful outfit on. Mikey's got like a very distinctive hat and a shirt. I'm just in black. So my goal for 2026, I think I just need a little bit of a style makeover. I need a little more pop. But that's not really going to motivate anybody in this podcast to change their goal setting life. So that's where we bring in Jen. That's where we bring in Mikey. These are people that have inspired people, coached people to new levels. So let's go. Jen, where do you like to start with people on goals?
I personally like to start with achievability.
Okay, right. That's good.
No, I actually think that something that we do as a team that is particularly smart is not only think about outcomes, performance, and process, but also think about the kind of goals that we can set that the business and the rest of our team can rely on versus any aspirational or kind of stretch goals that I might keep up my sleeve in my pocket, be thinking about on my own. So
you've probably seen me too often wear just black. So you'd be like, it's achievable to let's just go in a direction that's not black. And that would be like, it's not a radical step. Yeah. Okay.
Scott. It just needs you to get to like a brighter shade of gray.
There you go. Okay. I can do that.
But I think that's really important. The other piece that I'm particularly passionate about when I think about goal setting is relatability to overall strategy. I work with a number of teams and a number of individuals who talk about things I'd like to do because they are a passion source for myself. They relate to my job, not necessarily to a broader strategy. So reframing those conversations around great. And how is that going to make your bosses, their bosses' lives better or organization better, right? Like, are you connecting the dots as you're thinking about setting goals, whether it's, in the kind of structured format that the field note today talked about or otherwise?
Yeah, and you're right. It's got to be something that actually does bring you alive. And the whole point of the field note is really that leaders could set goals for their team, but it's how do you get your team involved in the setting of their own goals that really makes the magic. And I don't know, Mikey, have you ever had like a leader like say, Mikey, these are your goals for the year without asking you?
I've had it happen a couple of times, but it's always been in a mix. I've had good enough leaders that I think they knew that my buy-in on the goals was important, which is funny. The way that the field note is written, our author seems to think that doesn't happen very often. So I think maybe I've lucked out with some good leaders who did know that my buy-in was important for that. But every once in a while, like I would have had leaders who looked at my list of goals and be like, let's add one here, right, that you missed. Right?
It could be. Now, do you think, and I don't know, it's been a while since I was in a large organization where they had like this deep process of the annual review. But Jen, I imagine in the kind of larger organizations where we're coaching and you're working, maybe that's what happens here. And maybe that's why that assumption is there in the field note, that maybe it's the leader who's doing that once a year review and they're going over it and they're like, and here's what I'd like to see from you next year. And that might just be the danger gate that if you're coaching a leader to say, let's think about how we have these conversations. And that's where the insights of this field note really could be helpful.
Yeah, I was literally just thinking to myself, Scott, about the shackling of objective setting to merit increases.
Yeah, right.
And the bell curve and the kind of textbook process that a lot of organizations go through on an annual basis, whether they're touching base on progress against goals annually or quarterly even. I feel like the construct of we need you to set these objectives, and those are basically the only thing that we're going to use to review any potential reward, recognition, progress, development, growth opportunities opportunities that you might have at the end of the year versus, one of the paragraphs I liked most in the field note today around, by asking people to set their own goals, you're actually testing your team members and their understanding of broader initiatives, right? Not just what they're good at, what they do, what their job description is, but what the organization is setting out to achieve, how their work relates to other people's work, and a broader sense of kind of service to the organization above self, if you will. So I think it's an interesting exercise to ask people, tell me what you think is most important for you to achieve next year, and use that as a dialogue prompt for, tell me more about what you think is most important for the organization to achieve next year, right?
Okay. Now, I think I've got an idea for something we've not done before ever on a Lead Better, I don't think. So Jen, you're now the observer, right? And I'm going to have a conversation with Mikey, and we're going to talk, and then you'll watch how I'm doing in terms of if I'm following the kind of the process with the field note, and then just to kind of get everybody on board, if you haven't read it, kind of goes into the distinctive types of goals: outcome goals, performance goals, process goals. But you'll see how this goes. All right. So Mikey. Yeah. Let's talk about the social media performance of Admired Leadership. How did 2025 go?
You want to talk about like the goals that we had for 2025 and how we.
Well, yeah. Before we think about 2026, I mean, like for example, I know we have lots of different things, but let's take field notes, for example, because this Lead Better podcast, we discussed the field notes. And so we're just being very transparent with everybody listening. And, but where are we in terms of where you thought we'd get to in 2025 with the expanded reach of the readership? How's it gone?
Right. Okay. Well, we've hit like 100% of like what our outcomes were stated as, right?
What we would have liked to have hit when we passed.
We set out why we were going to hit it, and we nailed it.
And we nailed it, yeah.
But I think that there's still plenty of room for improvement.
Okay.
We launched this Lead Better thing where we took it off of just Twitter, where it was a daily conversation by audio, and turned it into video. So from like a structural point of view, I'm really glad. But we haven't really promoted it to our audience in such a way.
Sure.
So I think that's probably where we need.
That's an area for growth, right? So, but just on the overall number, let's just say, for example, not to like really dwell on the magnificence of the number too much, but 100,000 subscribers to Field Notes puts us in the top like 2.2% of all Substack newsletters as we reach an audience at 185 countries around the world. It's fairly astounding. So what I'd like you to focus on for next year, Mikey, is let's get that to 175,000. Okay. And if we're not at 190 countries by the end of the first quarter, I think that sounds like a problem. You okay with reaching those goals?
We need 5 more countries, and
75,000 more subscribers by the end of 2026.
Yeah, that goal is going to be kind of hard to hit in the quarter. But the 5 countries, we might be able to strategically do that and accomplish that one.
Okay, so Jen, now I'm being a little bit silly here, but obviously I was trying to be inclusive, getting to talk about how well we did. But then rather than saying, where could we have gone with it? What's a reasonable projection? I just said, I'm picking this number, 175. I'm guessing you were like, bzz, like if we'd given you a buzzer to chime in, that's where you would have probably nailed me.
I would have definitely hit a buzzer. Yeah, absolutely. And here's why, on a couple of levels. First of all, both of you did not address a why. You didn't ask about a why. You didn't offer a why, right? Why that many countries? Why that many people? What does that actually return to the organization at the end of the day? Like, what's the point? Just beyond numbers.
Or how many people's lives did we change? Like, what good did we do in the world?
How many people and organizations are better as a result of those numbers, right?
Right. I was so shallow. I was very transactional. Like, it didn't matter.
Just like your top. And and the other criticism that I'll offer you, constructive criticism, Scott, would be, you had an opportunity to say, fascinating how far we've come in 2024.
Right.
Mikey, what's your vision for 2026?
Yeah.
What do you see is possible? What do you see is important? What do you see is realistic and achievable? Give Mikey the floor first.
Well, and Mikey, if I had gone to the actual steps, then how would you have kind of distinguished between outcome and process? And, how would you have looked at all of that?
Right. So, I mean, on the process side of things, it gets into, well, what's my budget going to be, right? Which I may or may not have control over, right?
Right.
And so the other thought that came to mind is like, it felt like, and I knew what we were doing with the exercise, but it felt like this was a situation where I was being put on the spot in a way. It's like, oh, all of these things should have been like on my radar as the kinds of things that we're going to talk about. And therefore, if you really wanted this to be a constructive conversation and the things that Jennifer is bringing up here, then
you mean not like I put you on the spot, like live on a live podcast recording where people are actually listening in the
right. Like Jen wants us to get to the why, but unless I have a few things ready to go for you, knowing that you're going to ask those questions, it's just going to be like, okay, this meeting could have been an email where you'd have prepped me properly, and then we could have had a great meeting over it.
Yeah. Now, go ahead, Jen. And then in that, also fold in here your thoughts on this three-legged stool of the categories of outcome, performance, and process.
Yeah, because I was going to sort of throw the question back at you. I know it's your job to ask the question, Scott, but where I think it's hardest to kind of follow suit to the construct in the field note today, even if Mikey was forthright in saying 190 countries, that's exactly where we need to be next year. Totally agree 100%. Yeah. Walking that back to, Mikey, you mentioned budget. The outcome seems clear to me. I think the process goals probably seem clear to me. What you do every day, your behaviors, your routines, the actions that you take every day to get toward 190. But those performance goals in the middle,
that's trickier. Yeah.
It's murky water, right? I think making that clear for people is going to be a challenge for certain leaders to kind of say, what are those bigger actions? Maybe it's budget, maybe it's team competition, what have you. But that's where.
Well, and some of those things, it sounds like, when we think about outcome, the field note is saying sometimes these are things that aren't not in your control, right? And the process is sort of, let's get the steps of the day to day of how we're getting there. But performance comes down to just Mikey's not being creative enough. Right? Because I'm putting it right on you. You're like, your headlines have really sucked. Right. So how are you going to get better at that? Like, so it's going to be a more uncomfortable question. So Mikey, how are you going to fix that?
Right. No, it definitely is going to be the kind of question where you want me to be able to talk first about my performance, so that you can go, crank it up or crank it down a little bit based upon the vocabulary that I've chosen to use first. Because otherwise it might be a giant awareness problem that my performance is so bad. Right. Yeah. And if that's an issue, maybe it gives you all kinds of clues as a leader to be able to know how to direct the conversation.
Right. Here's the one thing I was trying to think of myself, and I don't know, Jen, if you do this like in your tracker, your planner, how you look at it. But like when you set goals for a month or a year or a quarter or whatever, I don't know that maybe I should be thinking more about it in this way. Like, what are the things that are just outcomes? What are the things that deal with specific areas of my performance? I don't know that I've ever approached it that way. Have you guys?
I think I have focused a lot on both ends of the spectrum around outcomes and the process. I think I probably can do, and maybe this will be a goal I set for 2026, is to think more about those performance goals in the middle. I think that is an indicator of how big and how small do I think. I think it's an opportunity for leaders having a conversation like this with their team members to gauge how big or small people are thinking. Not just do they have clarity and clear connection between their work and the ultimate why and organizational strategy, but also, are they thinking about products? Are they thinking about outcomes and impact and broader kind of things? So I think that's an interesting idea. But yeah, I have a tendency, Scott, to focus on outcomes and process. I probably could spend a little bit more time focusing on performance.
Yeah, I'm the same way. And even when we're thinking about personal goals, like in terms of resolutions for the new year, we almost always compose resolutions as outcome oriented.
Mhm.
If we start thinking of our New Year's resolutions of having these performance and process aspects to them as well, that could be a huge difference in lots of areas of our lives.
Yeah, I think so. And I sometimes you hear out there in the internet, world, people will reflect things like Scott Adams talks about, have systems, not goals, meaning it's all kind of process. And there's a degree, Billy Oppenheimer's newsletter this week, and he's, works with Ryan Holiday, and we've had long connections with that organization. And he was kind of highlighting people who are like, being an Olympian is kind of boring. It's just like you're doing the thing. You're just doing the work. You're just doing it all the time in the same way. But they're still shooting for that medal, right? And so it is a thing that we can sometimes get a little bit caught in the day to day. And maybe as we end this year and are thinking about how we help our teammates, those we lead, and even ourselves to be like, we're still kind of goal-oriented creatures. And so the way that we get good at setting our own goals and helping those on our team do that, maybe it really does lift everybody up.
Great.
I would love to reframe not change the wording entirely, but I'm thinking about purpose, right?
Yeah, right. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, we are human beings. We are driven by purpose. Like, we wake up every day to accomplish something, to feel a sense
For
of
sure.
accomplishment. So, yes, setting specific goals so that we can hold each other accountable for those goals, but like almost reframing the conversation is like your purpose, our purpose for 2026. What is that? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What does the world look like if we actually accomplish it?
Yeah, that's a little more inspiring than let's talk about process and outcome. Yeah, and Mikey's heard me say this. I read a phrase earlier this year in a Substack. I can't remember even who wrote it, but the phrase was how are you trying to make a dent in the universe? Like, what's the dent you're trying to make in the universe? Which is such an odd way to kind of say, oh yeah, what am I actually trying to do here? And it's not kind of just a process.
It's certainly not numbers for Mikey. I mean, numbers factor in, but there's something much bigger there.
For sure.
Speaking of numbers, we are 2 minutes and 30 seconds over.
There you go.
So, but that's a great place to end. Thank you both for a great conversation. This has been fantastic.
Awesome. Thank you.
Nice to speak to you.